Hi, welcome to Balfour. I'm Tom Maher. Today we're going to talk about putting in place contemporary privacy policies for your business. Now, with the Privacy Act and the Australian privacy principles for businesses that are conducting business here within Australia, there's different privacy laws throughout the world. In recent times, we've had the general data protection regulations in the European Union, which are actually more comprehensive and more rigorous on parties that hold personal information. And that's what we're talking about, personal information. Even though we're talking about you as a business, it's how you deal with individuals or people's information, not businesses' information. That's a first important distinction. The other thing about putting in place a privacy policy, and there's various regulations and certain businesses that must have a privacy policy in place, those that turn over more than $3 million, or those that are regulated, such as healthcare providers, accountants with tax file numbers, debt collectors, and so forth. But this is a general guidance today about privacy policies, and not just getting into the law about it, but the practicalities of putting in place, as I said, a privacy policy. So yes, sure, you could come along to a suitably experienced and trained lawyer who understands the privacy policies, but also you've got to understand actually business, technology, human resources, and even insurances, because all of these things tie together to actually be a proper privacy policy for your business. And again, like in life, everyone thinks, oh, well, it must be just standard, you come along and say, oh, I've got a standard will or, a standard business. But every business, even if you're an accounting firm or you're an engineering firm or you're a manufacturer or a retailer, everyone, even if it's a similar type, your nuanced aspects to it, the way you run your business, the way you have your team, the way you contain your data, the way you liaise with your customers, the way you capture personal information, each of those aspects are unique and important to be taken into consideration when putting your privacy policy together. So it's not just a simple exercise of contacting the lawyer and saying, oh, can you please put a privacy policy together and how much will that be? It actually starts with investigating your own business and understanding how are you actually capturing personal information, and then how are you dealing with that personal information, how are you storing that personal information, how are you updating that personal information, and how would you deal with that personal information if someone had a query about it. Now, if you can't answer all those queries, well, then you actually wouldn't be compliant for the purposes of the Privacy Act, let alone having the privacy principles in place. So it's very important to understand you need to have a stakeholder. You actually need to have a privacy officer, someone in your business who's going to be the champion, who's going to be responsible for it. Now, of course, I wouldn't be a lawyer unless I sort of told you about the bad things, and the bad things are really bad. It's not just that there are potentially multi-million-dollar fines for a business, but if you think about the individuals affected, they can actually have their personal information exposed and utilised. So you might be holding stuff like credit card information, a driver's license, a passport, their personal financial aspects, investment decisions, and so forth. Now, for that information to get out there, and that could be irretrievably damaging for them, and we've heard of identity theft. So not only for those individuals, and that's who we're concerned about, our clients and our customers, but you think about also your business. Yeah, sure, you might have actually gone and put in place your privacy policy, but it hasn't been properly actually implemented and secured and actually followed through, then you're going to damage your goodwill of your business, because people are going to go, well, I don't actually trust that business. I actually have major problems with them. And without naming names, but you can definitely Google it, there has been, and you see it on a weekly basis almost now, which is very unfortunate, you see these privacy breaches occur, and the damage by coming into the public domain and people hearing about these, everyone's going, well, that's very concerning. That's my information. Gee, I don't want people to know that. I don't want people to be able to get my credit card details or be able to create a false identity and start making investments and so forth. So you've got to understand that privacy is so integral to your business and the goodwill of your business. You've got to see it as an appropriate investment in your business's well-being and goodwill. So in addition to a privacy policy and a statement, you put it up on your website, if you've got one, most people, and of course, if not, you need to make it readily accessible and available at your business premises, normally at reception and so forth. Then you need to make sure that then you've discussed that with your team, and it's not just through the business owners, it's actually also your other stakeholders and right through to everyone from your clerical assistants to your receptionist to your accounts department, if you've got HR or anyone like that. Now, of course, in smaller business, it could just be you, but we've got to understand all those stakeholders have to be involved. Then the next important aspect is, of course, almost all businesses nowadays use some form of technology, is to understand how you store that data. Now, of course, if you've got files and paper and you like that and that's done, that's good. And one assumes as a starting point, you therefore lock your business premises, you put the paperwork away, there's security keys and access. But we need to understand that. That is part of your privacy policy. But of course, most businesses use the digital realm. We use computers. Now, one of the things with computers, of course, is they can store a huge amount of information. You can scan in those driver's license, that passport, that credit card information and so forth. Now, if that's stored within your business's systems, that's fine. But most businesses, again, use software and systems that are maybe outside of the business, and that's commonly known as being hosted in the cloud. Now, the cloud is literally nebulous. It's fluffy. It's out there. You need to understand who is your service provider? Who's your cloud service provider? What platform? Is it on Amazon Web Service, AWS? Is it on Microsoft's Azure? Or is it on some other system? Now, most importantly, and this is one of your primary obligations under the Privacy Act, is that data being stored locally here in Australia, or is it being stored outside Australia? If you don't know the answer, you need to find that out. That is actually a requirement, because you have to disclose to your clients and customers that their personal information may be stored outside of Australia. And then you have to be responsible for where that data is stored, and if a breach occurs, you will be liable, not necessarily that overseas provider. Now, this is really, really important to make sure you understand the end-to-end process. The other things people don't understand is the security risks with technology exist within your business. Say that you have a mobile phone application. Now, your mobile phone, and if you use it and you take it home and things like that, you might have children or other people could access it. Do you have a PIN code? Do you have Thumb ID or iris recognition to make sure that that's secure so someone can't get into your systems through that? So in addition to locking the doors to your office, do you make sure you lock your computer system? Do you regularly update your passwords and so forth? And one of the other aspects, and I talk about it in another session as well, is things as simple as your printer, scanner, copier actually has a digital memory and storage, a hard disk drive in there, and stores up to 2 years worth of data that's scanned and printed of everything that's gone through your office. So when you finish renting that or leasing it or hire purchasing it, whatever you do with it, make sure you have that hard disk removed, because otherwise you've released personal information potentially outside of your office and you don't know what could be done with it, all right? So that's another big important tip. The last one that I strongly recommend you do is you liaise with appropriately skilled and licensed insurance brokers who understand how to deal with cyber risks, they call it nowadays. And not only does it deal with privacy breaches, but it also deals with hacking, phishing, ghosting, and all the like. Now, insurance doesn't form some sort of complete protective barrier. In fact, it's a fallback aspect, but it's important to understand how that works in place with it. And your insurers will actually consult with you, and that's part of paying for those premiums, is make sure you get that advice from what is best for your business, because you want to mitigate that loss and damage. But remember, even if you were able to make a claim on insurance, that might not be able to repair the goodwill damage done to your business if there's been a breach. Now, the last thing I will say on all this is it's best practice. Nothing is impermeable. We've seen the Australian Parliament in recent times, universities, numerous businesses being hacked or penetrated by, let's call them various nefarious actors or third parties. So the trick is to really have best practice. And that includes communicating regularly with the staff, making sure they understand, to check emails, to reread them. It won't do if you simply say, oh, look, I've got software, virus protection or malware. The way they can trick what's called social engineering for people to get around that, to get to that personal information. Because as you might note nowadays, people don't rob banks anymore. What they do is they rob businesses of their personal and financial data. It's far less effort and they can get far more reward. So you don't want to be one of those victims. You want to show to your clients and customers and your team members that you adhere to best practice. The hassle, the stress, and the problems that I've seen when clients come to me about these problems when these incidents occur, they can be disastrous and very damaging for the business. So on the flip side, if you've actually got it in place, you can be confident in the way you deal when you go forward for tenders, quotes, when you're working with other business partners, and best practice, because that's really what we're all about in business. So understanding that getting a proper privacy policy is more than just a document, it's a full process of engagement and understanding with your team, your other stakeholders, your customers, clients, but looking after that personal information.